All right, so let me show you how to go about getting to the database from our website. I'm going to share my screen here. So this is the library's website. The way that you get to the library's website is you start from the Atlantic Cape website. You're going to go to academics and then choose library and tutoring. So that'll pop you onto the library website. Then if you scroll down, you go to library resources, and we're going to go to alphabetical list of all Atlantic Cape databases. And the database is reference solutions. So we're going to grab R, and then you have reference solutions. Now what happens here is it asks you for your library card number. So your library card number is on your employee ID, your Atlantic Cape employee ID. Under your name is your employee ID, but under the barcode on your ID is your library card number. It begins with 23456. And so if you enter that, I'm going to enter it myself here real quick, and then I'll reshare. So you'll enter your library card and click log in, and then come back to the share. Then you'll be into the database. And this is what Bill, who is our educational specialist on reference solutions, he works for Data Axle. He's here today to walk us through some different things that the database can do. This is where he will take over. Ray, how are you getting onto the database? Any luck there?
I just had to grab my card really quick, so I'm going to try.
Okay. All right, yeah, give us a shout once you're able to get in there. Bill, I'm going to stop my share and
Okay.
then let you take over the controls here.
Very good. I've had my designated amount of coffee allotment today, so I should be ready to go. Are you seeing my screen?
I am, yes.
Excellent. Very good.
And Ray just told us that he's in, so great. He's in the
In.
database. He can
Excellent.
follow along.
And Ray, since it's yourself, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. I'd much rather field your question at the point where we're at within the database than needing to perhaps back up to it. And I'm going to shut off my camera simply because I talk a lot with my hands and I don't want to distract anyone. So with reference solutions, we're out of Omaha, Nebraska. Started 50 years ago this year, so have been around the block a minute or two. Started off pretty much as a list marketing company. Our founder had information in the form of phone books sent to him, and he hired some people to do some simple data entry with the information that they were able to get from phone books. If you remember back in the day, phone books were everything, right? Every home had at least one, if not multiple. And you could always tell those families that were really using that book because they were worn and torn and beaten up, right? They had numbers scribbled on the outside of them, and they had stuff scribbled on the inside. Now, I am obviously referring to my household, but I'm assuming that it was that way in many households. So we captured that information and back in the day made it available via a floppy disk to libraries across the United States, and we'd send them 4 of those a year. They'd put it on the few computers they might have available and make that information available that way. When the internet became a thing, we obviously transitioned to that. I've been with the company now 15 years, and this is the 4th generation since 2009. regarding our database. So I'll walk you through some of the processes that are available to you for you to use. I do like to point out we offer webinars on Mondays and Wednesdays. So certainly feel free to join any of those. We do have one that's specific to entrepreneurs, but we're going to cover much of that today as well. We have some written material under the Learning Center. Let me point this out real quick. Of course, our contact information is here. Mickey can always give you assistance, but if you would like some written material, you can come in to the marketing and training material, and we have some of these flyers that are very good. I happen to really like this one. It's a 3-step, 2-page, how do I use the database and build my list, right? So it gives you that in real simple steps, along with some helpful hints that you might want to use as well. So that's available to you. We also have these database overviews. We have one that's specific to all of our business information, one that's in regards to our consumer, an inclusive one of all of these modules, of which there are 10. So feel free to take advantage of that information. We do have data dictionaries for both our business and our household information. If you had a question about a certain data element, chances are you could find your answer in there. And with that said, let me point out a couple of other items here. We do have an app. So if you'd like to be able to use that app, there are 2 modules in the app. That would be the US Business and the US Consumer Lifestyles. And then last but not least here, we do give you the ability, after you've logged in through the library, to create or register for your own personal account. And then you would be able to log in and save or retrieve any of the saved searches that you may have done through 9 out of these 10 modules. The only one that you can't save would be the jobs and internships, but all the others, you can certainly save them and come back to them at whatever point in time it makes sense for you. And with that, there are various scheduled updates that occur with this information. So let me cover that real quick. So the US Business Database, we're updating that information. And when I say updating, we call those businesses once a year to verify, obviously, address and name of business. We try and capture who that owner or manager might be, how many employees they have, the line or lines of business that they might be in, how long they've been in business. And we're pushing out those updates in this universe every Thursday into Friday morning. So 52 times a year, we're pushing out those updates that we learn about in those calls. Of course, if we've learned that that business is closed, we'll move it from our verified database into our closed database. We have one other file of US businesses, and those are our unverified records. Could be some gold in there for you, by the way. Simply because we did not reach them does not mean that they're not viable businesses. We just weren't able to contact them via that phone call to get that information verified. So we'll give you access to those 3 types of files, but we're pushing those out live 52 times a year. Our US historical business information, which is being fed from here, we started capturing this information in 1997. So that's as far back as that information will go in the historical US Business Database. We're updating that really technically at the beginning of each and every new month. So this entire universe isn't updated fully until December has expired, and we're able to do that last update then in January. Our Canadian information is updated monthly. Jobs and internships, which we're getting this information through Indeed.com, that's being updated daily. Our US new businesses, those are actually filings that we're getting through the Secretary of State's office. We also get them from postal processing. So if mail has started to go to a address and it's addressed to, Bob's ABC business, we're capturing it perhaps that way, as well as county courthouse information and utility hookups. So as we capture that information, we're placing it here. This is a very much a holding area for us because the information that we've obtained to that point isn't very robust. But when we make that call and verify that information, we're able to then give them a full record in the US business database. But as you might imagine, sometimes when we're calling these businesses, we find out they don't intend on opening just yet. Maybe 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, they intend on actually physically opening for business. If that's the case, we won't give them a full record until we've called them back and learned that they in fact have opened. So we're updating this weekly. These records will stay in here for 1 year so that you could look from a historical standpoint over the last few months as it would relate to those new businesses that have filed in an area. Our US healthcare, our standard white pages, our consumer lifestyles, and our Canadian white pages, those are all updated monthly. And then the US new movers, new homeowners can be a great database module to use. That's going to be populated through our license agreement, again, with the United States Postal Service's national change of address. We'll move those folks into this universe. We may have had them in our consumer lifestyles module before that move. We found out about that move, we placed them in here, and we decided to wipe clean that information because we don't know that everything will be the same at this new address. So they're staged in here for 1 year, and then during that time, we'll start learning about some of those lifestyle traits. I like to mention that when I first moved back into Omaha, I wasn't in this database. I started buying my dog's dog food at Petco and I signed up for a PALS membership. Within a couple of months, I was identified as a dog lover. Now, had I moved again, which I have, obviously I would have fallen into this universe as well, having filled out that national change of address. So let's do this. The nice thing about this, Ray, is all of these modules search the same way. Obviously, the criteria, the filter headings might be slightly different, but the processes I'll show you, the tools I'll show you, work no matter what module you might be in. So, and look at there, Mickey, I was worried there. I talked too much and it timed me out, but I'm good. I'm good to go. So whenever I come into any module, I'll always come to this quick search page first. Great for finding maybe one company. Maybe I want to look up one company. I could do that. I could look up an executive. Maybe there was an executive that I knew from another company. They've left. I'm not certain where they've left to. I could certainly try that first name, last name search. Hopefully we can narrow that down to a particular city and state. I could even do a reverse phone number lookup if I wanted to. And I do like to show this one tool, and we'll just use Atlantic City. I am actually going to be over there here next month for a conference. So I'm looking forward to returning to Atlantic City. Although I'm sure in November, there's probably no beach time. Is that a correct guesstimation? So I'm going to look at all businesses across Atlantic City, and these are only going to show verified records when I'm in this quick search. So across the city, I have a total of, as soon as this populates, 2,142. The tool I want to show you is this charts tool. What this will do is it will make sense of those businesses by type. So Raymond, you might imagine that as you're doing a search within the database, if this would be a helpful part of your process as you're looking at your business and launching that business. Perhaps you'd like to see what types of businesses are in a particular community, and that could be a city, which we're going to see, but I could also overlay a county area, or I do have a map tool that would allow me to also create my own shape and then look at any businesses that might be in that shape, whether they're by a specific type or just the fact that they're in that geography. So here's my first look, and it's always going to do that based on the standard industrial classification code. So it's giving me my top 7 across the area. Physicians are in that top spot, followed by restaurants. Notice we have a fair number of automated teller machines. I like to point that out specifically because I know in some cases, people would rather not include those kinds of records. I'll show you how anything could be omitted as well. So I've got my top 7, then I have a full report here. So no, that's 25 pages in length. We'll always give you that primary SIC, that description, and then of course the number of records that apply to that. So let's imagine that you had a product that you wanted to be able to sell in grocery stores. You could get to this group by simply clicking on that number 32, and it will hyperlink you right into that group of grocery stores. So no, you can always do that. I'm going to go back. I do want to point out a couple of other options here. You may have seen this. I can overlay, if I'd like to, the NAICS codes. That's the North American Industrial Classification System code. Technically has replaced, as far as Uncle Sam is concerned, the SIC codes. We've kept these SIC codes going because we've made them more granular than they ever were when in use by Uncle Sam. So we've added, instead of the 4-digit max that they used to have with the SIC codes, we've made it a maximum of 6-digit and a minimum of 6 digits and a maximum of 9. We could switch it up to the zip codes in the area, certainly that sales volume and or number of employees. And by the way, this is all printable or can be made part of a PowerPoint presentation. I know that oftentimes, and I mentioned SCORE earlier, they always like to have their mentees pull up those businesses that they may intend on marketing to and understand the number of employees along with that sales volume. Granted, we're looking at the entire community. We could be looking at just 1 or 2 or 3 specific types of businesses. Let me go back. Got to a lot of information, and we're able to do that by simply putting in the city, state, and then viewing those results. Most of the time, people will go to advanced search. By the way, additional filters is in fact the back door to advanced search. So let me go in there. It's going to purge all that information. It will then ask me to start anew. And we do have some additional filters. We just added legal name to the search criteria probably a month ago, maybe slightly longer. So if someone knew the legal name versus a company name, they could search it that way. Otherwise, we'll always give you both. The same thing is true with this executive information. We'll always give you all this information where we have it, but perhaps you want to find businesses that have an owner present. If that were important to you, and what is that? Excuse me, I have some strange window that just popped up on me. So if I wanted those businesses with an owner present, I could certainly make that my selection and just drive in those results. Or if I would accept perhaps a manager, I could always do it that way. And I may get both in some cases, but I'll be sure to get one or the other. So no, any of those selections can be used. Otherwise, we'll always provide it. Business type, I can always do a keyword search because how many people actually know SICs or NAICS codes? Probably not many. So keyword is certainly the easiest way to do it, as it notes here, like with restaurants. If I just wanted to look at restaurants, or maybe I want to look at restaurants and hotels, I can pull them up independently and add them to my selected field. I'll show you that in a second, but I do want to point out this major industry group. It is just using the SIC codes, and they're laid out just like they would have been when Uncle Sam was using this information, with these 2-digit numbers by category, and will always give you the breakdown. So for example, under construction, there's 15, 16, and 17. Well, what are those independent codes? There's the answer right there. So it will always give you that definition. And then if you were continuing to be interested in maybe general contractors, you can see it gives you the next segment, which is that 4-digit number that Uncle Sam had provided. And then we added 2 additional digits to make it that much more granular. So there's our 6-digit in this case. So either one, you can either do a keyword search or you can use that major industry group if having this visual step-by-step would be beneficial for you. Geography speaks for itself. I will show you this map-based search tool available in many of the modules. I know it's not available in our healthcare, but it's available in all the others. Phone speaks for itself. Maybe business size is important to you. We always give you the ability to look at it by range. And if you don't like our ranges, you may create your own. So let's say that you wanted to look at location only information. You can decide what that range needs to look like. Maybe the minimum needs to be 3 and that maximum needs to be 14. You can see how that crosses several of those, but it stops at that magic number of 14. So great way to be able to do that. And the same thing is true with sales volume. And speaking of sales volume, I want to make certain that you understand how we capture this information. So if it's a publicly traded company, that sales volume is coming from their 10K report. If it's a private company, we're modeling that information. So we're using information like how long they've been in business, what line or lines of business are they in, where are they physically in business at? Because we're going to have to allow some variances for taxes and payroll, etc. The also information that we get through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we'll use all of those factors in order to then build that model for that sales volume. So public, always capturing it from their 10K, private, that's always modeled. And the same thing is true with the business expenditures. Under ownership, we give you lots of ways to look at this. In fact, Mickey, I would mention specifically that these last 3 filters were just added last week. So female-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and minority-owned businesses, we're getting those through the SBA PPP loans that people have acquired. All of that is self-reported data that we're now making available. So again, that could be another type of filter that someone would want to be able to utilize in order to get to those kinds of results. I do like to point out as well, under ownership with headquarters and branch, if you need single location business information, notice you can get to that as well. So that's always going to be available, like I say, under that headquarters branch. No, for some reason, that seems to have been a popular search lately. We also have home-based businesses, so know that you could either choose to only look at those home-based businesses, and it could be by certain type or just the fact that they're a home-based business. Again, you get to drive or you get to decide what that would look like. Financial information will always give you that, where we have that available. We do have some special selections, and I do like to point out, so we had, and I mentioned with the US new business information, that once we get that record verified, we'll give them a full record and put them in the US business database. If you wanted to know about newer businesses in a specific community, you could certainly go with years in the database, and I would do that over year established, simply because this is 100% fill rate where this one is not. So if I were interested in finding either businesses by a certain type or just by age here, I could say, you know what, show me those businesses that have opened within the last 2 years in whatever geography is important to me. Could certainly do that. That can be a powerful tool. And I do like to point out professionals, all are one. We saw that when we looked at that result for Atlantic City, we had a lot of physicians. So that could be doctors, dentists. We also have CPAs and attorneys in there. So if you were putting together a list and you wanted one primary contact at an attorney's office rather than every single attorney in that office, you could change the default from all to one and only drive in that one result. Especially if somebody's planning on making mailing labels, that can save them a tremendous amount in terms of that mailing itself. And then we give you a number of ways to exclude this information. I mentioned that we had, or that in the Atlantic City area, there were a number of those ATMs. So if somebody did not want those in their output, they could certainly look for those ATMs. And once they're given that code and description, they can add that to their selected column. And as long as they've left that in play, they'll never see those automated teller machines again. Same thing would be true with kiosks. We have red box kiosks. We have those kiosks where you can exchange your propane tanks. So if you did not want that kind of information, you could always omit it. And we give you lots of different ways that you can omit information. Perhaps you're looking in an entire county, but you want to omit one city or a couple of cities. You could certainly do that. All depends. In fact, my gosh, they must have been listening, Mickey, to my webinars, because look at here. They just added that last week too. ATMs and kiosks. We can take those out of the mix altogether. I am going to be sending my supervisor an email. So know you can search or craft your search a variety of ways. Let's do this. Let's imagine for a moment that you want to start a catering business. Let's use that for an example. So what I can do is I can do my keyword, unless I happen to know the SIC code for catering, and then I could put it down here. But let's say that I don't know that. I can certainly always search for that. I can search for any type of business. So here's my caterers. I can add that to the mix. If there were other ones that I wanted to also include, I could do that as well. Let's do this. Let's do your county. So we'll do New Jersey, of course, first. And then I can go with Atlantic. So if I'm looking just at catering services, now mind you, this could be a large restaurant that also offers catering services, or it could be a mom and pop shop that's being run out of a home. I have a total of 67 of those around the county. If I wanted to look at that, I could just simply view my results and I'd have that 67 on 3 separate pages, because we do 25 records per page. But I want to drill into this a little further to produce those caterers that are, let's say, smaller. They're not affiliated necessarily with a larger company. So there's a few ways that I could look at that. I could always come into the headquarters and branch, and I could do that single location. What is that going to do to my total here when I look at that? So it dropped it down to 48. So you can see how by adding these additional filters, I can certainly begin to see fewer and fewer results if that's what I need to get to. Now, another consideration I might want to make is number of employees. Maybe I want to drive in my own number instead of using that 1 to 4, that 5 to 9. Perhaps what I want to be able to do is location only, and I want, let's say, at least 2 people, and I'll go with 5. That way I'm in these 2 different sections. Now, what's that going to do to my total as it relates to those number of businesses? So now it's dropped it down to 19. So you get a sense of how you're able to do that. Maybe how long they've been around is important. Maybe you don't want to look at any newer caterers. Maybe you'd rather find those that have been around for a while, weathered a few storms, right? So you could always choose to add the number of years. And instead of looking at those more recent years, maybe for me, the tipping point is 6 years and older. And I can come right in here and I can just grab all of that and add that to the mix. Now, is that going to change my number? So it dropped it off by 1. So you get a sense of, so tells you something right off the bat. There aren't a lot of new caterers on the block, right? So great way to be able to look at that. And then I can just simply get to those records. So I'll always give you that insight. I can also chart this. Oh, I can't without more than 50 though. So let's not worry about that. I do have the ability to put that on my heat map. That will always work. And what it will do is, since there are fewer than 300 records, it's actually going to pinpoint that information for me, just as it's done here. So I always have that availability as well. I know from having worked with a lot of SCORE folks, they love this kind of insight, and they'll actually encourage their mentees to include this view in their business plan so that they can talk to the fact that these are their competitors. So know you always have that kind of access. You're also able to download this information. So once those records appear, I can select company name and then go right to download. Comma delimited is always going to be the first option, no matter what module we're in. That would allow you then to create mailing labels. So great way to be able to do that if that's something that someone would need to accomplish. Summary would include the name of that business, their address, phone number, and then we have some additional information like who that owner or manager might be, their name and title, number of employees, sales volumes, etc. All of that would be captured here. And you can do as many of those downloads as you'd like to. There is a specific number that you do need to adhere to, but even with that number, you're able to go beyond that just one at a time. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to close that up. It'll always lead me on this instructional page. I can go back and it will say at the bottom of these records how many downloads that I can do at a time. So this would be 4 pages since there are 25 records per page. I can grab all 100, download those, and then I can come back and get another group of 100 and download those. The thing that's most important is that we deselect the first pages that we had and then advance to that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th page in order to get those additional downloads. Any questions regarding how I produce this or any of those options that I use for filters? Ray, did that come together for you? Does that make sense in terms of the approach that I took there?
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask, so I get these spammy emails all the time that are like, would you like a list of doctors and dentists in your area? And I'm like, I wonder if that's where they get it from.
Nope.
No,
We do
okay.
not work with them.
Oh, no, but I'm saying if they had access to this database, they could just go in.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Let me show you. So in these examples, let's see if it shows any with email addresses. So it says in this case, there's one with an email address, and then it says more info. When you select that more info information, it's going to have you contact us. That's something that we sell separately,
Okay.
right? So yeah, I know about those emails. But yeah, we don't do that.
Got it.
We are compliant with all of the marketing requirements as it relates to either email or, for that matter, even snail mail. Yeah. Any other questions, though? Any questions regarding any of these filters? I applied a few. And I'll apply a few more because I'm going to stay with this kind of theme as it relates to those caterers. Now, I do have information regarding consumers as well. So if we wanted to find those consumers that they might be a good market for these caterers to reach out to, I can use the database for that as well. Easiest way to do that is when you're ready to leave the US Business Database, simply select Reference Solutions. That'll bring it back to the home page. And then we can go into the consumer lifestyles information. As I mentioned, I was not in this database, but when I started buying my dog food through Petco and signed up for that PALS membership, that's how I was identified as a dog lover. And it's all about frequency, how often that activity is occurring. So if I'm a caterer and I'm looking for an audience that I might earn some business through, certainly I could always use the business side of the database to identify those businesses that I might want to reach out to about my catering services. There's nothing wrong with doing that B2B type of work. But if B2C is also necessary, the US Consumer Lifestyles is a great tool to use. And I would go right to advanced search. And I would go about setting up my filters just like I would as if I were looking at businesses. So there would be the matter of geography, and I am going to show you the map-based search tool here as well, because that might be something that you would want to use either on the business database and or the consumer lifestyles database. But the first thing I want to look at are the lifestyle indicators themselves. So how would this play or be used by someone looking at catering? Well, right off the bat, I do have this cooking and wine classification. And notice all of this information is being scored. I mentioned that earlier. So it's about people's activity in these various categories. So that scoring system is 0 through 9. If they're a 0, they have no interest, right? They're not doing anything in that or those categories. If they're falling in at a 9, that's as heavy an interest as you can get. We'll only show you records, though. We'll only produce those records for people that score a 6 or higher. So the 4s don't show up, the 5s don't show up. It's just the 6 through 9s. So I could go with this entire group of cooking and wine and just leave that as it is. Maybe I want to open that up, though, and get a sense of what is under there. So maybe as I'm thinking about my catering business, people that are interested in just general cooking, maybe that's not really my audience. Maybe it's this gourmet food and wine. So I could make that my audience. You know, there's nothing to say that as a caterer, maybe I also am a conscious caterer and I really try and provide for those folks that are into diet and perhaps weight loss. So I could include that group as well. And there's a couple of ways that I can do that. I can look at everybody that falls into this category and everybody that falls into this category. It's going to be a large number. Let's look at it. We'll just do it again across the county for this initial look. So here's my Atlantic. I added that. I'm going to add one per household instead of all per household. I want one name, one address. So when I look at these two groups, one per in the county, I have a total of 19,535 people that fall into those categories. Now I'm going to show you another option. So I have the ability to tie these two together. So they have to be into gourmet food and wine as well as diet and weight loss. I would be able to change that. Now what's going to happen to my number? Dropped it down to 3,000. So let's go into that group real quickly here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to chart this. So I have that same charting capability here. I have over 50 records, so I'll be able to chart it. It's always going to give me the first blush based on home value. I could switch it up to income. Perhaps I want to look at this from an income standpoint because I don't want to market to someone who might not be able to afford my services, right? So I can clearly see I've got at 12%, slightly over 12%, 376 people that fall in that 100 to 124. Then I've got another 311 that fall in that 125 to 149, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. So maybe this is going to become that group that I focus on initially. Let's do this. I'm going to go back to my results. I can always print that off or make that a PowerPoint, by the way. I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to change my filters slightly. And I'm going to overlay that home income. So I'm going to do that 100 to 150. So we know that now that we've changed that, this number is going to drop down to that 689. Another thing that I could do is I can view those results and I can put that on the heat map. Maybe I want to get a sense of where these folks are at because of my business location. So let's pretend for a moment that this is where my business is located. So this is really maybe that audience that I want to look at. So I've got Summers Point here all the way up to, what is that, 230, looks like 322 there, that highway. And I'll just come right up here to this leg of 40 and just come right into this area with my map tool. So let's do this. I'm going to go back to my results. And I'm going to revise that because I'm going to kick the county out. And I'm going to go to the map tool and I'm going to open that up. Let's go to Atlantic and go. So there's my area. I'm going to back out of this a little bit because I need to see that area. Where is there's my Summers Point right here. There's my 332. There's my 40. So this was the area Actually, this was the area I was going to focus on. I can do that. I can draw my own shape. I could do a true radius. I could overlay some predetermined boundaries. I could even create a drive route. But let's draw our shape. So let's say that I'm going to begin here at this Summers point, and I'm just going to go right up this way. I'm going to come right up here to this leg of 40 and then come right back over here. That's pretty much that area that I had identified before. And now I have 224 households that match my information that are in that area. I can then view my results. And if I wanted to put together a mailer, because I intend on mailing to them, I could certainly do so. We always include this information in terms of these phone numbers, not as many displayed anymore as there used to be, but the telephone numbers displayed may be on the National Do Not Call Registry and should not be used for phone solicitation. Ultimately, the user is responsible for that compliance. And with that said, I would add, there's a couple of different ways that you could, if calling were important to you, you could get a clean list that you could then call. You can download our list, send it to the National Do Not Call Registry. They will charge for the cleaning of that list, and then they'll send you back a reduced list that you could call against. We can also do that for you. Of course, there is a charge. So nonetheless, if I wanted to send out a mailer to these folks, and I know that I can download 100 at a time, easiest way to do that is select next to first name, then advance to the next page. Repeat that step, and you would do that for 4 pages. I'm going to stop there. Simply go to my download. Again, just like we saw before, comma delimited. And if summary would be enough information, meaning the name of that person at that address, their phone number, and these additional elements, those would all be included right here. So you'd always have that insight that you could make then available. And if you were intending on downloading that entire list, since you can do 100 at a time, I encourage people, open up your own version of Excel, simply do a copy and paste from mine, drop it onto your own, and then keep adding to your own upon each download. So you would simply minimize yours, come back here, close mine, go back. And as I mentioned before, the biggest thing is deselecting those pages. Easiest way to do that is revise search. Then you can view results, because we don't forget how you built that. It'll leave you on page 1. And if you'd truly done, in this example, I only did through the first 3 pages. If I'd truly done 4 pages, I would just type in page 5 and hit enter, and I'm ready to go with more of those downloads. And this is what you'll get with that information. So it'll always have that address information, that estimated home income and home value. We're getting this through the Census Bureau, and then we make some adjustments based on the owner percentage of occupied housing. In other words, not a lot of multifamily dwellings. And then, of course, there are those lifestyle indicators. Certainly, I had gourmet food and wine, as well as diet and weight loss. So that's why that record came in. Otherwise, it would not have shown up if it weren't that 6 to 9. Any questions regarding the search that I did, or any of these elements that I may have used? Certainly the map tool, the income, and then those lifestyle entities. And if I wanted, and I did tie those together.
I do have a quick question about the lifestyles. I know you mentioned in your own case with the dog food, you purchased the membership or what have you at the store. How is the database grabbing that information? And then you said frequency ultimately determines the score. Just wondering
Exactly.
how all of that is kind of brought together.
Yep. So we do have those company partners, whether it be credit card processors or those companies themselves that will provide us that insight. And then what we do is we overlay that against that address.
I see the credit card companies. That's
Those
interesting.
not the credit card companies, the
The
processors.
processors.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And we don't have any insight in terms of, I get this question a lot, especially with relationship to pets. Do you know how much they're spending on their dogs? I do not.
Okay.
Or they'll say, do you know how many dogs they have? I don't know if they have happy dogs, glad dogs, mad dogs, or
Mhm.
sad dogs, right? I just know that they're active in that category.
And you can assume that the higher the score they have, the more frequent purchasing perhaps they're doing in that
Exactly.
category.
Yes.
Okay.
So if they're buying their dog food at the grocery store and they're paying cash for that purchase, I don't have that
They're
insight.
ducking you, right?
Well, they're not ducking anything. I just would not have access to any of that kind of information, right? Because
Right.
there's nothing tied to them. I had a library that I used to work with down in Boca Raton, Florida, and I'd worked with this lady for a number of years, and she called me one day and she said, Bill, I'm looking at my mother-in-law's record. So that triggered all kinds of thoughts right off the bat for me. I'm like, why is she looking at her mother-in-law's record? But she said, Bill, there's a problem. It says that she's into technology and entertainment. And I can tell you there's nothing further from the truth than that. And I said, so let's think about this for a moment. So what you're telling me is that your children's grandmother never buys them anything for their iPad or their Game Boy machine or any of that kind of stuff. And she said, "Oh, I get it." I said, "So how did you happen to find your mother-in-law? Was she in a search that you were doing, or did you just look her up?" And she said, "I just looked her up." I said, "So that's where we don't hold the same strength, because then it just becomes about what they've done, but not necessarily equating the scores to it." Right. So she was like, "I get it. I get it. I must have been sleeping during that part of your presentation."
Right. Because when we pull up the individual record, we get a whole listing of things, but we don't get the
Right.
scores. It's
Right.
through that search that you do for the large pot of people that we actually start
Exactly.
then pulling in the people with the high scores in those categories.
Right. So let's do this. Let me change this. I'm going to go back. What's that number going to become? I want a little bit more. I'm going to just throw in another couple of categories. I want a much larger number. So 32, that's good. So I'm going to pull in under consumer snapshot, another section of the database. I'm going to pull in marital status, presence, children. So I'll grab those three and I'll just grab some age ranges. I'll say married, presence of children. So what's that going to do to my total? So it dropped it down to 831. So at this point, because we selected information from consumer snapshot, that insight is all considered sensitive. So we no longer show all those records. The only thing you can do is chart it, put it on a matrix or a table. So if somebody wanted to know, okay, I definitely want to know marital status, and I want to know age. I don't care because I know that they already have children or they wouldn't be in that count. So I want to do that against the zip codes in which they live. So then I'm going to get those age ranges, all those age ranges that I selected. I know they're all married. These are the zip codes they're in, and this is how many records apply to each of those zip codes. So that's as close to seeing information is there. We suppress the names at that point and the addresses, obviously. That's as close as they can get to seeing that data at that point, because of the selections that were done from Consumer Snapshot. We'll show you this information on a one-off, but we won't show you that information collectively. Does that make sense?
So if you're creating a business plan and you want to get more granular, you can come out with the total number of people in a particular area that fit X criteria,
Exactly.
but you can't get their names and create a mailing list and start sending them mailers.
Correct, because then we lose control. We don't want to lose control, right? We want to make certain that people are doing what they're doing with the database information responsibly.
But it's still important in terms of creating the business plan because you can get the actual
Exactly.
number.
Exactly. Yep. And I hear from students, or I shouldn't say I personally, but we hear from students all the time that are working on various marketing plans or business plans, and they're asking various questions about being able to do certain types of searches within the database. Raymond or Ray, anything for you?
No, I'm already having fun plugging away and doing searches.
Okay, excellent. I like to hear that. You know, it is amazing what you can do with this information. I used to own my own business. I would have loved to have had access to this kind of information. Didn't have it back then. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Any final questions before we say goodbye?
I think we're in good shape. I do want to say thank you again for coming out 2 times over the last couple of weeks and presenting to our community here. I really appreciate it.
You bet. I would be happy to do something in person when I'm out that way if you would like so.
All right, I will keep that in mind. And
Very good.
when I get some feedback from different folks on campus, if
Excellent.
think that there might be an opportunity for you to present to some students, that could be cool.
Right. Or even if I do a lot of lunch and learns, I promise not to make any of the food, but I've had it delivered. So if you would want me to do something even with instructors and we invite them in over the lunch hour, we could do that as well.
All right, cool.
You bet.
And I'll be sure to share this recording with those that have, asked for it. And thank you for
Sure.
allowing that. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Sue. All right. Well, I bid you all a fond farewell. And let me know if I can do anything for you in the future.
All right, thanks again, Bill. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And